Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
This is Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions for the Break It Down Show. Tonight we have a fantastic album fight. This is a fun one. We also have two first-time judges, but I want to give Phil a chance to introduce our fights. Phil, can you give us our corner call?
Today's album fight is a 9-round matchup between the Fab Five and a motley-looking crew of umlauts. In the red corner, we have the synth pop and new wave fashion of Duran Duran with their second studio album from 1982, Rio. And their opponent in the blue corner, we have the guitar-heavy aggressive sounds of Motley Crue with their debut studio album from 1981, Too Fast for Love. Let's get ready to ramble. Take it away, judges.
Thank you, Phil. Perfect, just like always. Always makes me laugh. Yes, we are ready to ramble. So let's first recognize that Tony is here, the real Tony Alvarado, and he's judged in the past, so I'm going to lean on you a little bit for your seasoned judging. And you introduced us to Eric. Eric, introduce yourself. It's your first time in the ring.
Hey guys, Eric Stangeland. Been a musician for 31 years, guitar teacher for 25, and I pretty much love all kinds of music, so I'm really excited to be doing it.
And of course, a long-time part of the Break It Down show and Jay Moore family is Mike McCloskey. Mike, welcome to your very first album fight judging session. What are your thoughts going in, man? How do you like this fight?
It's going to be interesting. I think we all grew up with a lot of this music, and as a long-time listener, I enjoy everything that you guys do, and it'll be fun to partake. So let's get it on. All
right, let's do it. Eric, going into the fight, what initial thoughts did you have going in? But before you did any of the work, what were your assumptions?
Well, we talked about, I definitely grew up in this era. I knew the Motley Crue record was super raw, and I knew the Duran Duran record was really produced. So I thought it was interesting because there was two completely different styles of music, but two completely different production values on these records. So those are the two things I was thinking about before I started diving into the songs and listening to them one at a time.
And Tony, what about you? What were your thoughts pre-fight?
Yeah, that was the same, pretty much the same thing. In addition to, I was a fan of Duran Duran growing up, and I got the copy of Rio, my first copy, when I was about 9 years old, and I wore the heck out of it. So, I was very familiar with that album, but Motley Crue, the first album I wasn't very familiar with, so it was interesting to do a deep dive into that first album and see really how raw it was and how you could tell that they were on the brink of something big with this album. So It was really cool to get into both of them.
That's a great note. Let's find out Richard's pre-fight. Richard?
This pre-fight started off very straightforward. The numbers came in, and they were very clear. It could have been a slam dunk. It should have been a slam dunk. Do the numbers, analyze, record, done. But something didn't sit right with me. 13 categories were used to analyze this fight. They overwhelmingly went in one direction. But there are 3 categories that most resemble the way we do the fight. The other 9 categories are more overall numbers where the albums are viewed as a whole and not by the individual tracks. And in those 3 categories, like the album fight, the one album still won 2 of those 3. But only one was by a narrow margin, and with enough ties that it could in theory be won by the other album. But it's the third set of song v song numbers that threw everything into a shitstorm. It overwhelmingly went in the favor of the quote-unquote losing album. And by so much that when I averaged the 3 categories together, the lesser album ended up winning song v song. And this is what made me take pause. So the only thing I could do is try my best to look at this myself. So I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain here. When predicting fights, I never listen to them until after I've researched and recorded the pre-fight. I want the prediction to come strictly from the objective nature of the numbers. But in this instance, I had to look at the fight to see if I could get rid of whatever was bothering me here. So what did I learn? The initial number said Duran Duran, 8 categories to only 1 for the Crue, and 4 ties. Even if those ties went to Motley Crue, they still shouldn't win. And on paper, that means the fight should be something like 6 rounds to 3. I had my doubts, and I listened to the fight. And god damn it, I ended up with a tie. A 9-round fucking tie. While Rio is a gorgeously produced album, it falls into the trap of sameness in some songs. Some even using the same keyboard hooks and very similar melodies. For the Crue, it was very evident this was a very, very new band that hadn't quite gotten a firm grasp on songwriting and really established their own sound. It sounds more like a medley of music by their influences than by the Motley Crue that they become later. But there is a raw, and I mean very raw potential there, so I found myself forgiving some of the unsmoothed edges because you could hear greatness in the fuzz, if you want to say something like that. So now I'm stuck. What do I do? Well, I'm going to favor the numbers and the production value and still call it for Duran Duran, but it will be close, and even possibly a split decision. And I can't rule it out that there could be another tie, but we've had so many lately, surely we can't have another, right? Right, guys? Back to you.
Perfect. Richard, as always, predicting a close fight, but has a very good prediction that I'm sure we will see what happens as we start this thing. So I guess that's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and go round 1, Rio versus Livewire. And we're going to have Eric, first-time judge, start us off.
All right, so I'm not a big fan of either band, so I really have no bias, which is kind of cool going into this. I'm going to start off with Rio. I was really surprised on how jammy Rio sounded. It's almost meant to be like a song you'd hear a band do when they're stretching out a song live. Very good bass playing, that surprised me. Solid song structure. Very strong chorus, but a little too jammy for me. Livewire is probably one of my favorite Crue songs. Like I said, not really a big fan of either band, but it's one I've actually covered in a band before. Straight ahead rocker to the point. Very raw mix on this record, but for a song like this, it works perfect. The cowbell fills always cracked me up. I love how the intro riff just grabs you and you're basically holding on for 3 minutes and change. I give this one 10-9 for Livewire.
All right. Mike, how did you have it?
So for me, growing up a huge Crue fan, I mean, I've always liked Duran Duran, but this has been a band that's always occupied kind of one of those Pantheon type, shelf kind of things for me. And, for better or worse, everybody snickers. But I would say there were 2 hard rounds for me, and this is the first one that could have gone either way. I think when you start off with Rio, it is a perfect song in a lot of ways. We already mentioned the bass, the drums, just how everything interplayed together was really great. Livewire, I think it's the quintessential start to an album. It's raw, aggressive. I think it really sets up the contrast between both of these albums kind of that we'll see throughout. I think at the end of the day, the one reason I gave it to Livewire at a 10-9 clip is that, Rio just got a little long in the middle, and that sax solo kind of just dragged on a little bit too much, and it lulled me to sleep. And I think to start an album, I think Livewire is a better way to go.
All right. That's great analysis. Good job on your first round. Tony?
Well, I'm going to be pretty boring because I'm going to say pretty much the exact same things that Eric and Mike said. This was a tough round for me, too, like right out of the box. You have Rio, which is a great song. I mean, it's funny that it was the 4th single released from this album, but it's a great song. I remember the video. They're all on the boat, and they're all in their nice suits, and it's a fun song. The melody is catchy. The lyrics are good, and it's a great song to open the record. But then Livewire comes in with that opening guitar riff and then the drums, and it pretty much just punches you right in the face. You know what's coming. it cracks me up too, the gratuitous cowbell at the end of the song. It's like, that's so 80s and so Motley Crue. It's a perfect opener to the album, and you know, with this being my first dive into this album, I know Livewire was a single, but yeah, it definitely got my attention. I gave it to Livewire 10-9.
Wow, all right. And just for the audience's benefit here, the CompuBox judges universally disagree with you guys. So you guys all went with 9s on Rio, and we all went 10, and the other way around on the other side. So already some stylistic differences. We'll have to see what happens here in round 2, My Own Way versus Come On and Dance. Mike, start us off.
So for me, this is not one of my favorite Crue songs. I think this is one where Vince's voice does sound weak, and I think that's one of his trademarks, for better or worse, over his career. Super raw song. It is what it is. I liked My Own Way better. I liked how the music was layered. You had the interplaying of the keyboards and the electronic kind of music as it was going. And at the end of the day, it was 10-9 Duran Duran on this round.
Tony?
Yeah, Come On and Dance is like another in-your-face rocker song. And, you know, what I appreciate about Motley Crue is that, you know, they don't make any bones about what they're there for. They're there for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's just about it. And so they come right in there and go for it. But this song seemed to lack something for me. It wasn't the cowbell, because that came up again. But, you know, during the verses, I thought the sound was okay. But then the chorus hits, and I thought the lack of production caused that song to take a hit there. My Own Way, you know, the version on the album is actually slower than the original, which was interesting when I was doing a little bit of research. And I like the melody. I like the lyrics. Not sure why he's drinking 7-Up on Broadway, but I mean, it's the 80s, so maybe there's something else to that. But I thought at the end of the day, same as my 10-9, My Own Way.
Fair enough. Eric?
All right, well, the first notes I have for Come On and Dance was more cowbell, LOL. So there you go. The mix in this song doesn't really work for me, and it doesn't really hold up. The guitar tone is bad, and the harmony vocal in the chorus is pretty cheesy. I like the groove of the track overall. I think Tommy Lee's a great groove type drummer, but the middle section is almost like a complete waste of time, to be honest with you. This song shows they had a way to go, but they were on the right track with some of their ideas, I believe. My Own Way. More good pocket bass playing. This bass player it was catching my attention right off the bat. The chorus is forgettable. The tune has almost like a pseudo disco feel to it, with the on of the rhythm, kind of like a disco on the and. I feel like this one gets too jammy again, and it's really just based around the chorus. Cool guitar licks in the ending. I'm starting to realize already within song 2 that Duran Duran was more talented than I thought back in the day. I went 10-9 for My Own Way.
All right. A solid 2 rounds here in the book. Let's just keep going. Let's go round 3. Lonely in Your Nightmare versus Public Enemy number 1. Tony, start us off.
All right, so Lonely in Your Nightmare. It's a good track. I like the bass line. I like how the vocals wind through the song. I really liked how the chorus is let me in, let me in, let me in. I really like that part of the song. But then here comes Motley Crue with Public Enemy number 1, and this song, once again, we're 3 songs in, and you can see Motley Crue's formula for 3 out of 3 songs. What I really liked, I don't know why, but I really liked in the song when he says, to be under the gun, on the run, having fun. When you're young, you're so young. When you're young, I thought that was really cool. And then it just goes right in the chorus. I felt like kicked me right in the balls. 10-9 Public Enemy number 1.
A ball kicker. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Eric, how are your balls?
They're good. Thank God. So I'll start off with Lonely in Your Nightmare. The bass player is carrying this band more than I realized. The fretless bass in the beginning is really cool. I love the clean guitar parts. To be honest with you, the vocals don't really do anything for me, and it's starting to become formulated in terms of like forgettable verses but strong choruses. Most people will probably kill me for this, but I'm starting to realize the Duran Duran guitar player is a much stronger player than Mick Mars, which is the Motley Crue guitar player. And Public Enemy #1, I feel like it's like a throwaway filler song, very 70s glam sounding, strong chorus, bad production again, decent solo. Could have been a little bit shorter, but I feel like that's kind of a showcase solo on the record, which every 80s band seemed to have one of those. It's the first song where there's not a breakdown. I think the strong chorus saves the song. I couldn't decide on a winner on this one, so I went 10-10.
Oh man! All right, now we got to give it to you. You know, it's fine. Of course, it's a viable score, but for the future, we pick nits until we can try to find a winner, or you absorb being called a coward. Coward!
Oh, I'm a coward then. Oh, I didn't know that. Shoot. I thought you could go 10-10, like you couldn't pick one. Oh, crap.
No, you have to pick one, right? You know, yes, you can go 10-10. That's a viable score. We just try to discourage it because, you know, we want to try to sort this out at the end, but and force ourselves to cut the baby, you know?
Well, the good news is I think that's the only coward move I made on all 9 tracks.
I like it. I like it.
So everything else has a winner, I promise.
And I spared Tony from having to call you a coward because normally I make the seasoned judges do it. So next time for sure.
Thanks, Pete.
My pleasure. Mike, any cowardice in you?
I have no cowardice in me, at least yet.
That's my tiger.
So I guess a couple things. I mean, you know, Public Enemy #1 was always one of those Motley Crue songs for whatever reason I liked growing up. But as I put on the headphones and really listened to it, as you know, you like us to do and do the work, I just found it didn't age well, Pete.
Yeah.
And I think back to probably like 5th or 6th grade. I mean, you guys may be a little bit older than I am, but I've got Motley Crue's uncensored VHS tape, and we're watching that. And this is when they're playing, you know, the early version of Public Enemy #1, and it's just totally like early 80s. And it was cute then, but now it didn't age well, and I can't fault them for that because this really was recorded almost 40 years ago. But the one thing that got me was I don't know if I'd ever heard, you know, Duran Duran's song that was going up against it. And as I sat down and listened to it, you know, I like the mood. I like the overall sound. It is highly produced. I think all three of us have noted that, you know, Duran Duran are much better musicians than I think any of us ever gave them credit for or remembered. And I think I just liked that song better going up against Public Enemy #1. So I gave it 10-9 Duran Duran.
All right. Well, I like this. Let's slow down for a second. I want to talk to Eric because you're the musician. And yeah, we're recognizing that and for whatever reason I knew this, probably because John taught me this, but Duran Duran is choppy as fuck.
Oh, it's so interesting because, like, I'm 44, so when this record comes out, I'm 8, but like we talked about, it didn't really hit until 84, 85, so I'm like 10, 11. I'm like wanting to play guitar. I didn't get one until I was 13. But I always remember, no offense, Tony, sorry, I always remember Duran Duran as being like a band that like maybe my sister would like. You know what I mean? So I never gave them credit, right?
Right.
But then as going back, you know, and listening to these songs, and you're right, some of these songs, they don't age well at all. But I was so surprised on how good they were musically. I mean, like very surprised, you know, which is cool. And then it was also interesting on the Crue stuff where I never was a big fan of the Crue musically either. But it was interesting on theirs, they're not there yet. And you can tell, like if we were doing this verse, maybe like Dr. Feelgood,
right,
or this verse, Girls, 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 it would be, it'd be very interesting because I felt like the production value is better on those records, especially the Dr. Feelgood record. That's the Bob Rock, you know, formula that the Metallica Black album came after. And the production is amazing on that record. And I think the production hurts them a bit on this record, unfortunately. It's raw, which is cool. There's a lot of people that are really into the early Crue, love this record. But for me, I don't know. I think the Duran Duran musicianship shows up more because of the production value for sure.
Tony, these two albums, we're already both noticing from both of them that there's a lot of formula. Are you worried going forward that we're going to get a little bit sick of Mick Mars' playing? God bless, he's doing what he's supposed to do, but there's a lot of the same thing and a lot of the same sounds in Duran Duran as we've come to this point. What are your thoughts going forward?
So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned, but as we've talked about before, Pete, we've got, you know, so many acts in musical history that will follow that formula. from decade to decade with their albums, and we see them inducted into the Hall of Fame quite often. And so, yeah, it does get a little exhausting from a listener standpoint, because it's like, oh, great, another song that sounds the same as, the one I had heard on the last album. But, it works. And if it works for the band, then, and they're selling records and selling out stadiums and arenas, then there's not really a reason for them to stop.
Fair enough. Let's keep moving forward. Let's go ahead and go round 4, and I'm curious if we're going to see a knockdown here, because we got Hungry Like a Wolf, a worldwide smash, versus a song called Merry Go Round. Eric, what do you think?
Oh, I'll tell you this. We'll go Merry Go Round first, okay? Mick Mars actually gets to show off on this song also, which is kind of funny, because I just said in the last one, that's the song he gets to show off on. I felt like this song shows the band off more, almost like a ballad, but the chorus picks up enough that it's not really a ballad. I like the cool muted arpeggios, and Mick really carries this song. I found it to be another strong chorus, but this time the verses are kind of weak. When I knew this was the one that was going against Hungry Like the Wolf, I knew I'd be picking this over Merry Go Round without even listening to it. It's a really easy one in my opinion. Hungry Like a Wolf is a beyond strong song, excellent verse, great pre-chorus and chorus. There's really nothing wrong with the song. It's perfect length, very catchy, classic guitar riff that gets stuck in your head. The breakdown doesn't really need to be there. That's my only complaint, but it seems like Tony talked about a second ago, it's that formula, and the formula is working. And that was, like I said, the one thing that really surprised me about Duran Duran as I got into this record. There's a lot of breakdowns that just I don't know why, but yeah, that was, to me, this was the easiest one of the bunch, to be honest with you.
I agree. I scored it.
So I had 10-8. I had 10-8 Hungry.
All right. So yeah, I agree. I had the same kind of score. Let's hear from.
So Pete, I think listening to this one, I think I agree absolutely. Hungry Like the Wolf was the song, that's going to be, the winner of this round, regardless of what it was going to go against. But I think the one thing that saved it for being a knockdown for me was the fact that, Mick really did, drive the song in that middle part of it, and he really picked it up.
Yeah.
So I loved, the synth and the keys that, Hungry Like the Wolf has, the depth of the lyrics and the storytelling that you started to see throughout. And I'm not a super big story from a lyric person. I like how the words play with the music versus what the artist is trying to say. But I think at the end of the night, it was 10-9 for me, and it was because of that guitar solo that Mick had kind of midway through the song that kept it from being a knockdown.
Perfect. Tony?
I'll start with Merry Go Round as well. And when it first started off, when I was listening to it, I thought that was the obligatory ballad that was on every 80s rock record. And I really liked how it changed up to a faster pace. I liked how I thought the melodies simulated a merry-go-round, which was kind of cool. And it's a decent song. I mean, I'm not going to knock the song, but yeah, just like Eric and Mike said, you're going against a legendary song, an iconic song in Hungry Like the Wolf. And whenever I think about it, I remember I think of the guitar riff, and I always think of the video with Simon Le Bon acting like Indiana Jones. That for some reason that always stands out in my mind. And it was this was like the perfect song, and this was perfect for Duran Duran to break through to the MTV generation. It's the video, it's a catchy song, good-looking band, and everything seemed to click here. I went 10-9 for Duran Duran here.
All right. Well, let's keep clipping along then. They're at the halfway point here at round 5. Round 5, Hold Back the Lane, Take Me to the Top. Mike, what do you got?
Oh, this one kills me. I mentioned when I started that there were 2 rounds that just were absolute daggers for me to judge. The first one with Rio and Livewire, Hold Back the Rain, and Take Me to the Top was the other one. Partly because I think Take Me to the Top is the best song on this record from Motley Crue. Wow. It's just got such a great, I just love the drive through the song. It's aggressive. It's everything that I'd want in it. But at the end of the day, when I compared it to Hold Back the Rain, I think we've all teed up the sneaky musicianship that Duran Duran has. The chorus is a little dated, but I loved the interplay of the bass, the keyboards, the drums. There's kind of a drivingness that's going throughout the song. And unfortunately for my Motley Crue sensibilities, I had to go 10-9, Hold Back the Rain, and that shocked me to death.
Yeah, and I'm shocked to look at your scorecard up to this point, and the last 4 rounds have gone towards Duran Duran. Does that shock you to hear that?
It does. I mean, at the end of the day, there are iconic songs that Duran Duran has on this album, whether it's Rio or Hungry Like the Wolf or the main ones, that this version of the Crew doesn't have yet. I think it just came out, those come later in terms of the career-defining songs, and I think the Crew is just figuring out, how to begin with Too Fast for Love. But yeah, it shocked me as I listened to these track for track that, a self-described Motley Crue fan was trending so heavily towards Duran Duran this early in the fight.
And I think we should pick out that you helped me build this fight. You said, let's get Motley Crue Too Fast for Love in there, right?
Yeah, I think you teed it up. You're like, okay, let's find some 9-round, 9-album song, 9-album CDs, and let's figure out, what we can do for an album fight. And I threw out Too Fast for Love, and it's not my favorite Crew one, but I still go back to it all the time. But yeah, it was an interesting little battle. Let's put it that way.
Tony, how did you have this round?
So I thought Take Me to the Top. I liked the opening drums into the guitar. I felt that the song pushed you around a little bit. And it wasn't anything like super special. It just seemed like it was simple, just a simple rock and roll song. I thought it was solid. I thought it holds up over time. Hold Back the Rain is probably the song that I liked least on Rio. And it's like when you have a great song like Hungry Like the Wolf, I was expecting, the next song to not be as good, but still to be, I'd be able to listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And I was just disappointed. I thought the chorus was very repetitive to the point of nauseating. And it seemed like a filler song to me to equal out the sides of the album. Like it was like they've got all of these songs on side 2, and they're like, we need 4.5 minutes. Let's throw a song on there. And I actually thought that the album would have been complete without this song. I went 10-9 for the Crew.
All right. Eric.
So me and Tony have known each other for 27 years, and it's almost like he was in my head on this one. I'll start off on Hold Back. It's kind of funny. We're going to sound like we wrote the same notes, but this one to me sounds too much like Hungry Like the Wolf, but not in a good way. It's a good song, but not memorable. The bass is way too loud and very Iron Maiden-like in the chorus, which I thought was really bizarre. Chorus is okay. Song feels like a filler. I'm starting to realize the singer has the same phrasing in a lot of the verses of these songs, which I thought was interesting. I would have liked a solo instead of a breakdown. It's almost like that was like a prerequisite in Duran Duran songs on this album. Take Me to the Top. Love the riff. This is where the raw production is great. I love how the bass line changes under the guitar riff, which gives it a little more action. Love the tempo change. Strong verse, stronger chorus. I can see the song being like a sing-along song live for sure. Interesting, the solo doesn't hit until the end of the song. Usually solos were like in the middle of the songs, for metal bands back in the day. I felt like Mick really opened up on that solo when he's playing with fire on that track. I gave this one Take Me to the Top 10-8.
Oh, whoa, a knockdown. All right.
Yeah, knockdown on that one, yeah.
Yeah, the leather's getting thrown around.
Hey, Pete, as the Crew fan, I really don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. I bet you don't. But, all right. I want to add, Eric, we're just past halfway here, right? And Mike made a great point, and I think both of these bands suffer from this. They're not quite there yet. It seems to me that thus far, Duran Duran hits the ball a little farther, but there's a lot of formula, there's a lot of repetition. Look, the album that Motley Crue's put together is close, right? It's like 80%, like it's like a B-, and if they just had some other element, and they like Too Young for Love is itself, the song itself is close, but Too Fast for Love, the song itself, the album, it's almost there. But the next album, Shout at the Devil, Too Young for Love, like those songs are totally different things. What changed between those albums, do you think?
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business, or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show. Are totally different things. What changed between those albums, you think?
I can tell you a couple things. As being a musician for many, many years, they got to tour like crazy. And touring makes you a tighter band, but it also allows you to see what's working and what's not working live. And that's a big going back to the drawing board for the next record. A lot of times when you listen to bands, their second or third record, that's usually when they start really hitting their groove. And it's usually that touring. How much did they tour? I mean, I think they played the U.S. festival with Ozzy before they even were signed to a label, from what I remember. You start playing gigs like that, you start playing with Ozzy, playing with a lot of bands that have great musicianship. You kind of learn how to be, I don't want to say more professional because the crew is pretty crazy, but I think you craft your songs better because you're starting to realize what works and doesn't work. I mean, before I ever played live, we wrote a bunch of songs, but the only people we're playing them in front of is us.
Yeah.
When you go out and play live, you understand, like, okay, this part's way too long, or this part doesn't really work with the audience. When you go back for that next record, you can be like, all right, let's chop this down a bit, or let's do this, or let's do that. And I think with the crew, you start to see that as they go on throughout their career, and I noticed it with this album, is the riffs are there, and the vocals are starting to get there, and maybe just a better producer too, because you definitely did see that within that 83, 84 to about 87, 88, they really grew as a band.
Well, and they largely self-produced this album, and then they had an actual pro. And the pro is going to sit back, and I'm going to tell you who it is in a second as soon as I think of it. But the pro is going to sit back.
Tom Worman.
Who?
Tom Worman is the guy that produced this one. It produced Shout at the Devil, produced Theater of Pain, and then he did Girls, Girls, Girls. He did it was Open Up and Say Ah by Poison. I mean, he was all over the 80s, right? So he had a formula, but he got the band to go from, the sound that we heard on Too Fast for Love to, polished, and I don't want to say poppy in a bad way, but poppy in a mass consumable way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he figured out what they were strong at. It's funny because I'm looking up right now on Wikipedia, who knows how true that is. But he did, Twisted Sister, Stryper, Poison, LA Guns, Kicks, Nugent, Cheap Trick, Molly Hatchet, Blue Oyster Cult. So you kind of see, like you said, you're kind of seeing he knows that formula for what works in that time period.
Right. Yeah, he's the guy for sure. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's go ahead and go into round 6. New Religion versus Piece of Your Action. This for me was an interesting round. I want to see what you guys think. Tony, start us up.
I'll start with Piece of Your Action, and once again, it's no shame, just sex and rock for 4.5 minutes. Just here it is, and this is what we're gonna do. And I thought it was a typical Motley Crue song. I thought it was a good song. When it comes to New Religion, so I got this album. I got Rio, my first copy, when I was 8 or 9, and I wore it out. But I wore out the second side because I thought the second side was fantastic. I thought the first side was good. I thought the second side was great. I thought New Religion, when it opens up with that with the opening part, and then it goes in. It takes about a minute for it to get going. I thought, whoa, this might be a whole new, different album that I'm listening to. I really like the opening sequence. Then it breaks into the guitar and the bass, and I really like the 2 tracks of vocals that are heard during the pre-chorus. You can almost vision it like a conversation going on in Simon Le Bon's head. And I thought that really played well. I gave this one to Duran Duran 10-9.
All right, Eric?
Okay, so I'll start off with Piece of Your Action. I think it's another great start to a song. Another good verse, another solid chorus with a great riff. One of the things I liked was the slide guitar in the solo. Most rock and metal bands really didn't play slides. Slide's kind of a hard thing to do. Most of your classic rock, southern rock bands do it, but like your rock bands, you don't see it too much, especially that early on 82. he does really good for playing within the song. I thought in this one, Mick does. I think it's a solid song. I think it's a great Crue type song. Okay, so me and Tony are going to agree and sort of disagree on the next one. New Religion, I felt like the intro pretty much went nowhere. They could have cut that one out for sure. Again, very solid bass line. I'm enjoying the space between the guitar and the rest of the instruments. I'm not feeling the verse again. It's almost like he's doing it on purpose to make that chorus pop that much more. There's your wrestling term. One thing you'll notice between pop and rock metal music is that pop music will add little things in like the second verse to keep the song interesting. What I mean by that is like the extra vocals like Tony was talking about, and then the clean Nile Rodgers type guitar part. And the second verse is a great example. Then we go back to the jammy middle section, which they really like to do on this record. But the weird thing is they don't go back to the chorus after they do that. And a lot of other bands do that. Well, they'll go from that breakdown section and then boom, they hit you with the chorus 2 times out, song's over. And I thought that was kind of weird. I went piece of your action 10-8 on this one.
10-8. Oh, another knockdown.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's keeping it exciting, that's for sure. Mike, how did you have it?
How did I have that? That's a good question. I think when I sat down and looked at this, I really thought the Crue was going to win on this one, but I don't know if it was the mood that I was in the multiple times that I listened to this since we kind of hatched this idea. But I'm going to go 10-9 in favor of Duran Duran because I really felt like the bass and the musicianship within New Religion was a little bit sneaky good. The guitars stood out. I kind of like the mood and the feel of that the song had. Compare that to just the driving force of kind of the piece of your action. But at the end of the day, at this point in the album, and I think that's one of those key things, I was still feeling Duran Duran. Now, do I feel that in songs 7, 8, 9? I don't know. But at this point I did. And, I'm going to go 10-9 Duran Duran.
All right. And so we've heard John Taylor's name come up a number of times. He has those fantastic bass lines. And he's one of those guys that almost seems to play, like Mark King, almost seems to play lead from bass, and then everything else kind of fills in the space around him. I like to hear that. Let's do, and for you guys who are new judges and new listeners, we call the round 7 the Burford rounds because Scott Burford noticed that this is when a lot of rounds kind of have to like take a breath. They've put their strong foot forward, they've flipped the album over, and this is where sometimes we find some interesting matchups because of the filler that is often there. So the Burford round 7, Last Chance on the Stairway versus Starry Eyes. And let's go ahead and go with Eric.
Okay, so I'll start with Chance. This one starts better in terms of a build to start the song again. I'm kind of starting to feel the same way on all these songs as they continue, though, unfortunately. Another solid bass line, okay verse, chorus is okay. Another thing I'm starting to realize is how dancey these songs are in this new wave vibe. It's almost more like a disco-y type of vibe than a new wave vibe. Another breakdown jammy thing in the middle with a xylophone, which gets some bonus points, but nothing really memorable in this song. Starry Eyes, not grabbing me either. Verse is forgettable, but yet again, another chorus that's pretty strong, which is interesting. Something I took away from these Crue songs is that the choruses were stronger than I remember. The riff's okay. There's an interesting single note riff for the bridge. Solo was okay, but I like the riff-like qualities as the solo continued, which I thought was neat, which was a nice surprise. I like how they go to the chorus after the solo, something that Duran Duran should have done in the last song we talked about. The solo at the end is pretty bad and should have been edited out, in my opinion. I went Starry Night 10-9 on this one.
All right. Wow. All right. That works. Mike?
So my opening comment for this one, guys, is that this would be the only round that if I didn't have to pick a winner, I probably wouldn't have.
Same.
Neither of these two songs really jumped out. As many times as I've listened to the Crue song, Starry Eyes has never been one of my favorite songs. However, I really did not like Last Chance on the Stairway. I felt like I was listening to some like weird Cure song. It was a little bit too slow. In the middle, it just kind of ran up and down. And again, we're in that zone of very repetitive kind of formulaic songs for both bands. But for Duran Duran, I feel like it's starting to add up. And then I think when I look at Starry Eyes, I mean, yes, it's, over the top, cowbell, there's Mick Mars' guitar, and it's a very repetitive chorus. But because I liked that better than I liked The Last Chance on the Stairway, I went 10-9 Motley Crue.
Oh, nothing wrong with that. Neither of these albums was improved by the presence of these two songs. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
All right, Tony, how's your round?
So everything that Eric and Mike have said about Starry Eyes, I pretty much wrote down myself. I thought that this was a good song from front to back. Once again, simple. I liked the groove, the melody. I liked, and this was, once again, the first time that I've done a deep dive into this album. And the first time that I heard the song Starry Eyes, I liked it. Now, I said before that I wore out Rio's second side. Last Chance on the Stairway was the song I liked probably the least on the second side when I first started listening to it. It does have a good melody, and who can't use a solid Voltaire reference in the lyrics?
Right.
I like at the end of the third verse where he says, I don't even know what you're thinking, I don't even know what you're drinking, but it keeps this heaven alive. Even though I was like 9 or 10, I had no idea what that meant, but I thought it sounded cool. But I gave this one to Starry Eyes 10-9 because I liked Starry Eyes from the beginning. And Last Chance had to grow on me over now almost 40 years. I went with Starry Eyes.
Yeah, all right. So 10-9. Okay. Yeah, I wanted just to jump in and just look at like some of the lyrics in both of these songs. Like you really could cross them over. Neither band is putting. I know Nikki Sixx did the bulk of the writing, so I'm assuming he wrote Starry Eyes. But just I can't get into words how I feel. That's a lyric in this song. Like, well, then what are you writing the song for? Because that's kind of part of the point. Do an instrumental then if you can't get into words how you feel. Get it right in this song now. I had to set her free. Needed a friend. Come back to me. Not spectacular songwriting, Nikki Sixx. Not. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get into round 8. Save a Prayer versus Too Fast for Love, the title track. And let's have Mike start us off.
Okay, so for me, this is a 10-8 round for Motley Crue.
Whoa.
Driven specifically by that opening riff. And if I could hum it out and not embarrass myself completely, I would. But I think if we all can internalize what Mick Mars' opening riff sounds like, that's exactly what did it for me. I think by this point in the battle, I'm kind of on fatigue from some of Duran Duran's tunes. And as strong as I was for them early in the battle, by the time I got here, it was just too slow. I didn't like the keyboards. And to go up against that driving opening riff that Mars had, I was just kind of like, all right, this is one of those where, you've got two fighters that are going side by side and somebody just gets either a haymaker or a lucky punch like late in the battle and puts them on the canvas. So that's kind of the way I scored it. So 10-8 Crue.
10-8 Crue, a knockdown. Tony.
So I'll start with Save a Prayer. It's my favorite song on the entire album. I thought that it's a fantastic new wave song from the opening keys, John Taylor's bass line. I thought the lyrics were good. I thought this song was just, we talk about formulas, but I just thought that this song was a little bit, it may be a little over the top. I thought it worked. I thought it was really good. I thought the song was strong lyrically, but the one thing that you have to make sure when you listen to Save a Prayer is you gotta listen to the 5-minute version because the edited version is just terrible. It cuts too much of the story out. Too Fast for Love, Motley Crue comes out, the opening riff, Vince Neil steals your girl and he's gonna let you know about it for 3.5 minutes or so. I thought that Too Fast for Love, like Mike said, the riff was really good and it starts you going. I thought this song would have won a round against any other song on Duran Duran's album, but not against Save a Prayer. So 10-9 Duran Duran.
Eric, how'd you have it?
I also had a 10-9 Save a Prayer. I totally agree with Mike. Right off the bat, that intro is it's classic Crue. The verse is decent. I like the harmony vocals in the pre-chorus. I thought that was a nice touch. The chorus is strong, but the gang vocal response in the chorus was a little weak production-wise. I felt like way too long of an outro chorus for my taste. It's almost like they didn't know how to end the song, or they didn't want to put another part into the song, so they just repeated the chorus with some drum and guitar fills. Save a Prayer, love the old school Nintendo sound in the beginning. This is what I've been waiting for since Rio. Very solid verse right out of the gate. Pre-chorus is very strong, and the chorus is the strongest part of the song, which is kind of how you're supposed to do it. Very singable, lots of feel in the vocals. Other than the Tarzan synth part in the song's beyond strong. It's the first one where the bass didn't stand out or grab me. So like I said, 10-9 Save a Prayer.
All right, let me ask you about that great analysis, by the way, on the Tarzan synth sound. This is one of the things that I've noticed about, apart from Rio, where they actually brought a sax player in, they do everything with the synthesizer, and there's some real powerful things that are being done by on the different synthesizers they have there, the Rhodes and the Moogs and all those things. But I always wish that they would actually bring actual horns in, or bring if it's a pan flute or whatever that is for that Tarzan sound, because I promise that if Zamfir comes and he plays the pan flute, he's not going to play that Tarzan sound. He's going to play something better, So Nick Rhodes is fantastic at playing the marimba and, sound effects and synthesizers and keyboard. But would you please let Zamfir come and actually play? Don't you think, Eric, that might have changed that sound if they had found a slightly different way to do that?
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example. I love Hall & Oates, but I hate that they use a drum machine for some of those tunes. And if you watch Daryl's House, and you see these songs play with the drummer, oh my God, the feel is so different. The pocket's amazing, and I totally agree with you on that. It's like, bring the real instruments into the equation, bring a real horn section, bring, a pan flute, I think new wave bands really relied on samples, keyboard stuff, for a lot of that stuff. And maybe it was part of that sound for that era.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, I do agree with you. You get the real live instrument it's supposed to be. It always wins.
And that person's an expert on that thing, and so they're going to say,
exactly,
not like that. Let's do it like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are times when this bet with the synthesizer pays off, and Rhodes really nails it. I mean, Mick Rhodes is fantastic. There's times when he's looped stuff, and you're like, how is he making that sound come out? But there are a lot of times when, if you just had 4 dudes with horns blowing the back of the wall down, you would get to a different place in these songs. I'm definitely confident in that. Okay, let's go ahead and go into the final round. We finished the penultimate 8th round. Final round, round 9, The Chauffeur versus On With the Show. Tony, start us off.
All right, so I'll start with On With the Show. I wrote down in my notes, it sounded like a song about moving on after tragedy, because every band has a song about that. And we were talking earlier about, the lyrics not being sophisticated, and I wrote down, he was bad, he was never good. Like, okay, that's, thanks a lot. I didn't really care for this song at all. It has a good guitar riff, but that's about it. I didn't really like it that much. The Chauffeur, on the other hand, I thought it's completely underrated. I like how it comes in slowly. It creates a dark mood. I like the story and the lyrics. I like the ending of the song at the last minute and a half, where Simon Le Bon's is playing the instrument. I think it's the ocarina. And it just allows my imagination to wander. And then it ends with the shaking car keys. And I thought that was a great way to end Rio. I gave this one to Duran Duran 10-9.
All right. Eric?
We couldn't be farther off, buddy, on this one. I'll start off with The Chauffeur. I thought the song was interesting because it's not like any of the other songs on the record. Drum machine with an old school hip-hop vibe, eerie keyboards, no real instrumentation until the weird break with a flute or keyboard flute. The song is totally baffling me. I don't know if there's a chorus. I don't really know what the song is about. It's a perfect ending to a record, though, if you want to have that avant-garde type of song on a record. On With the Show, I'll be honest, I'm a sucker for songs like this, up-tempo type ballad. Great intro, great verse, very strong chorus. I really enjoyed this guitar solo, and I actually wish it was a little longer, to be honest. You can see how this song was almost like a precursor to Home Sweet Home. Very Thin Lizzy 70s sounding solo, second solo. I do think a fade out would have been a better choice for an ending on this song, to be honest with you, than the way they ended it. I went On With the Show 10-8.
All right. Mike, you want to close us out?
I don't know if I can top that one. I think the chauffeur did nothing for me. Like, as I listened to it, I think it was the last song. I was going through a number of songs. Like, I think I was at Duran Duran fatigue, by song number 7. But by the time we got to 9, it could have been good. But, I felt like I was overloaded on, similar content and sounds throughout the last half of the album.
Yeah.
I've always been a sucker for On With The Show. It is a kind of sappy, sad song. It's very simple. But I think Eric hit the nail on the head in terms of why it resonated and why it sounds good and why it still kind of carries on to this day. And with that, I think it's going to be 10-9 Motley Crue with On With The Show, outside of the fact that it's just a sad song with a nice ending to an album. I think it just ended well. So that's the reason I picked the Crue over Duran Duran on track 9.
All right, and that concludes the fight. So let's take a look at what happened. Richard, give us your post-fight thoughts.
Well, I guess I don't really have much to say. Holy shit, it was a tie. And, wow, like 3 weeks in a row or something like that. And, well, if I learned anything, I think my gut is more accurate than I expected it to be. I don't really have a whole lot to say here because I think the judges did a great job. And it lined up with kind of how I saw it, too. On paper, they don't seem like they're evenly matched, but they turn out being very evenly matched albums for various reasons that they've mentioned, that I mentioned in the pre-fight. So, wow, this was a very interesting, very difficult fight to kind of wrap your head around. Styles make fights, I guess. So let's see what comes up next week. Maybe we'll just keep this streak of ties alive. I don't know. See you then.
Yeah, Richard, great point about the similarity. Yeah, I like that. Fellas, here's what I'm looking at as I look at the fight card. We have a split decision draw. So Tony had it 86-85, basically 1 round difference going towards Duran Duran. Eric had it 86-82, going the other direction with a lot more knockdowns against Duran Duran to find it for Motley Crue. And then Mike sitting squarely on the fence, 85-85. And so the third week in a row, by the way, we've found these fights that we just can't get a definitive answer. And just if we look at the CompuBox, we see a lot of disagreement in terms of the judges, not a lot of same. But the judges came up 2-1 for Duran Duran. So still very close numbers across the board. I mean, the scores are for the CompuBox judges. I had it 86-84. Michael Perry had it 86-84, both for Duran Duran, and then Phil had it 86-85. So this is a razor thin fight. So thoughts on that, Mike, going in? Like, given that you had a tie, and we're not going to break it, but if you wanted to break it based upon song v song, what are your thoughts? What did you need to hear maybe less of, more of from Duran Duran or Motley Crue?
First of all, I apologize for being a pussy and ending with a tie.
That's not a pussy move. That's just the numbers, It just works out.
I did not. There was no intended oh gee, if I could just sit on the fence on this one. That wasn't the thought. I think it came down to, for me, rounds 1 and 5. So we had Live Wire and Take Me to the Top. Probably 2 of my favorite Motley Crue songs, especially on this album, going up against, Rio, and then the one song that sneakily I started to like, which was the cheesy kind of Hold Back the Rain. So as we got into it, I just thought they were 2 evenly matched bands. They were exactly 180 degrees from each other when you looked at, the type of music they played, the scenes they were in, but yet they all typified that early 80s, kind of late 70s, move into what became MTV. And it was, just interesting for me that I gravitated towards Duran Duran on this album more than Motley Crue. I think if we had done this on any other Crue album outside of this one, especially Pete, you mentioned Shout.
Yeah.
If we'd done Dr. Feelgood later in their career, totally different outcome, I think, just based on the maturity of the band at that time. But this one, it was fun to do because you had those iconic Duran Duran songs going up against a very raw Motley Crue, and it was just like, again, it was just fun to work through, and I've got nothing other than a 50-50 at this point, so I apologize.
No, there's no reason to apologize for a tie. I mean, you go down the score sheet, you're picking rounds, and it happens. It's nothing wrong with that at all. I think also this is the first or the second album for Duran Duran too, so they also have some seasoning. If you put this out, Motley Crue against Notorious, 86 versus. Let's see, what would that be? Too young for. Anyhow, if you did that, we might still have two bands that have figured it out and are hitting hard, and still have a draw. I think it just kind of depends. I did want to say this to you, Eric. I totally agree about Live from Daryl's House, and we've had their drummer, Brian Dunn, on the show several times.
Oh, nice.
And we talk a lot about that and how, when they bring in these alternate, these other musicians, and Rob Thomas says, hey, I want to play this in a minor key and make Kisses on My List a totally different song. And they look at Brian, and he's like, okay, we're going to go cross stick and bass, and that's about it. And it's like, he totally changed the dynamic in the room. So it goes to that point that we were talking about in round 8. Your thoughts, you had this quite a bit different. Even though the musicianship of Duran Duran was notable, you still had quite a bit of an ass-kicking here for Motley Crue. What was the difference for you?
I think the difference for me, and I wrote notes for the outro of this, I think the difference for me was I thought Motley Crue was what I thought they were going to be, but I was really surprised on how strong a lot of the verses were vocally. And I'm not talking about like performance, just melody-wise. I wasn't expecting that. I felt like the record showed they could write some classic songs, and just a couple of years later, they really achieved that, especially with the production jumping up as their budget increased for their albums. It would have been interesting to see if these songs would have been better with a Duran Duran-like production, or if they would have lost their charm and edge with that type of production, like they did later on in Dr. Feelgood, in my opinion. I felt Dr. Feelgood was a good record, but I felt like it was too overproduced, and I think that took the edge away from Motley Crue, where like the Girls, Girls, Girls record, I think was like that perfect Motley Crue attitude record. I just felt like I just was surprised on how strong the choruses and the verses were. I always knew the riffs were strong, but I was very surprised about that. And I think that was the thing I was thinking Duran Duran was going to do. And I was very surprised about how much musicianship Duran Duran had. I didn't think they did, especially, the bass playing is amazing on this record. It really is. I also didn't think Duran Duran was going to be so jammy on their songs. And I think if we're going song by song like that, the jammy stuff doesn't work for me in terms of the songwriting, because I feel like it's that part that is just there where there could have been something better. If you have like an Allman Brothers or something like that, that makes it that goes out the window, because the jam part is super important with that band. But I just felt like it was more atmospheric type jamming, and I think that was the big thing for me. I felt like the songs were more together for Motley, even though the production wasn't as big as Duran Duran. But I came away with having a lot of respect for Duran Duran musically that I didn't have when I was younger.
Yeah. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that and honestly, both bands are kind of dance music. They approach it from a different angle, but there's a lot of similarity in what they're trying to do. I feel like lyrically you could often swap the lyrics from one song to one side of the ring to the other, and you would get a good song. It's just they're I don't want to call them pop bands, but there's definitely, at least in terms of these two albums, it's hard to stand out because they're fighting the same style, maybe, just with, one's got Lycra pants on and one's got a lot of 80s coats with shoulder pads. Tony, thoughts post-fight?
So I was impressed with Motley Crue. I've never been a big fan of Motley Crue. I think the only Motley Crue album I ever bought was one of their greatest hits albums, and to be honest with you, I don't even know where it is. I think I listened to it a couple of times. I was like, oh, okay, so all I need to do is turn on my classic rock station. I can hear all these. But I was impressed with how they came right out from Livewire and just, they put everything on Front Street and said, this is what we're here to do, and come and watch us. And I was super impressed. The production quality wasn't that great, and I thought that suffered in this fight. But you could tell. I think we mentioned this earlier. You could tell that they were really close, and they were going to get over the hump, and they were going to be huge. And then it turns out, a couple of years later, there they are. And full disclosure, again, I've had multiple copies of Rio. I loved the second side. It was interesting to see that my love for the second side wasn't necessarily shared by everybody, but I liked seeing how we matched up an early album from each of these artists. It was Duran Duran's second album, Motley Crue's first studio album, and it'd be really cool to see, I think we mentioned this too, to see how take this 10 years out.
Yeah.
And now let's match them up again and see what it sounds like. Like the Wedding album, let's see how that plays versus something else of Motley Crue's. But I was super impressed with Motley Crue. This is an album that I'm going to listen to more because it is good. I just didn't think it was as good as Rio.
One of the things I picked up as I did the work was, as Motley Crue matured, they've got so much talent there. One, it's always weird that Mick Mars is 10 years older, so I always wonder what's his internal dialogue as he lives this life that these younger guys are doing. But also, Tommy Lee needed to get out from behind the drums. Not necessarily grab a mic up front, but they needed to use his star persona more, and they did it more. There was a lot more call and response between Vince and Tommy. I really like that. We didn't quite get there with the album. I think if there was a little more of that, where they just had more tools in their bag, and like Eric said, they go on the road and they find those tools and they learn how to use them. But I think that was one of the things they were missing. And and Richard says this a lot. The 80s, a lot of things are overproduced, and Duran Duran certainly suffers from that because there's just a lot of the same sounds, a lot of the same themes, and it was just hard for them to get out of their way, I think, a little bit. Those are just my thoughts. Let me really quick do the disclaimer here, just so everybody understands. We love these albums. We listen to them. Everybody listens like, I love Duran Duran more than before. I didn't realize how good Motley Crue was. We love this stuff. So when we're being critical, it's to the purpose of doing a compare and contrast. These guys are in the ring. Look, both these albums have sold millions of copies. Both these bands have sold, I think, over 100 million albums each, if not well over 50 million apiece. They've won awards. These are great bands, and we're totally down with that. So don't get too upset about that. As we wrap this thing up, you're fine. Final thoughts, Eric.
Okay, so I'll tell you a quick story that's really cool. I'm reading Bob Daisley's autobiography. He was the guy that pretty much helped write the first two Ozzy records with Randy Rhoads. And when they were touring with Motley Crue in '83, he swapped tour buses. So he went on the Motley Crue bus, and Mick Mars went on the Ozzy bus for a night. And Motley Crue told Bob Daisley they were going to fire Mick Mars after the tour, and Bob Daisley actually convinced Motley Crue not to fire him. So that would have been really, really interesting to see who they would have brought in and how much that would have changed their sound. My final thoughts, I really enjoyed doing this, and I felt like it was awesome that all you guys did your homework, and I really enjoyed listening to other people's takes on songs. It's always cool to hear what you hear and then hear what somebody else hears about a record, and I thought that was awesome. And I learned a lot from listening to these records, but I also learned a lot today from hearing everybody's opinions on the records.
Mike, what are your final thoughts?
I think, first of all, thank you for, inviting and allowing us all to participate in this process. I think what you and John do kind of around the album fights is a terrific way to engage the audience. So hats off to you guys. So that's the kudos to the host. I think when I look at the overall Motley Crue Duran Duran, it really would be interesting to see how we stack this up, later in their career. I think that was a terrific point. I think, the interesting thing, what happens if, Motley Crue isn't a, drugged out heroin mess come around, girls, 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 and that album isn't 100%, there's a lot of filler on that one. There's a lot of great songs on that one. How does that stack up against some of the later Duran Duran stuff? But they themselves are a band that had issues later in life with people that have left. You get the new guitarist, Warren Cucurulo in that, just is an insane musician. So it would be interesting to see where that one goes. So I think overall, I enjoyed it. I got a chance to revisit a lot of the songs that we all grew up with and listened to. So overall, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, my pleasure. Tony, final thoughts.
So I was when I came into this the first time, I didn't know what to expect from Motley Crue. I kind of knew what to expect from Duran Duran, but it was really cool to do the deep dive. And later on, after when I'm growing up and I'm into Duran Duran, and then I start getting into Depeche Mode and New Order and Joy Division, those types of bands. But then I also started getting into the 80s rock band, the Poison, and I was into Van Halen, and then Motley Crue a little bit later, casually. But it was really cool to see when I listened to the Motley Crue record how you could see their track, and then Duran Duran, they are what they are, and I had a really good time doing this, and it once again, to echo the sentiment, it'd be really interesting to see them later on and see how they match up.
Well, then let's just go ahead and say we're going to do that. We'll find some two rounds. Let these guys all go get past their medical suspensions because both of them are pretty cut up. But let's have them come back and get in the ring and see what happens when we get the seasoned bands in the ring together. So, And Mike, thank you so much for the recognition. That's really sweet of you to do that. I don't know that anybody else has said that directly like that, so thank you so much. And let me thank you guys for coming on, because one of the best things about this is sharing time with one another. Like Eric said, I love hearing what you guys all hear and seeing what you see, and there's no bad analysis. It's all interesting, and there's always unique takes. And you don't know the mood of the person, if it's raining outside. All these things come to bear, and for sure, Duran Duran and Motley Crue never thought, we better do our best because we're going to be put up against another band 35 years from now, and we want to have a good showing. So I always love the coincidences that come out of these things, and thank you all so much for doing this with me.
Thank you, Pete.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was so much fun.